Come gather close, come feel the flame. Leslie George, remember the name. Island soul with a fearless spark. Truth speaks here and it leaves its mark. No dimming down, no playing small. Stepping strong and stand up tall. You walking bold, you move with grace. Mosaic sparks, come take your place. This is where brilliance learns to speak.
There's a difference between responsibility and feeling responsible for everything. Being responsible means you handle what belongs to you with integrity, consistency, and maturity. Feeling responsible for everything means you begin carrying emotions, decisions, and consequences that belong to other people.
Come gather close, come feel the flame. Leslie George, remember the name. Island soul with a fearless spark. Truth speaks here and it leaves its mark. No dimming down, no playing small. Stepping strong and stand up tall. You walking bold, you move with grace. Mosaic sparks, come take your place. This is where brilliance learns to speak.
How much of your exhaustion comes from your own responsibilities, and how much comes from trying to manage the choices, emotions, and consequences of people who keep ignoring your advice? That question may explain why some of the most dependable people are also the most drained. They're carrying their own responsibilities while quietly picking up the worry, the confusion, and fallout that belong to other adults. So welcome back, Sparklers. Welcome back to Mosaic Sparks with me, Leslie George. And today we're talking about Sebastian from The Little Mermaid and what happens when caring becomes carrying, helping becomes rescuing, and leadership becomes the exhausting belief that everything will fall apart unless you step in. Now, Sebastian is loyal, alert, and deeply concerned about what could go wrong. He sees the danger, gives the warning, and tries to keep everything under control. Yet Ariel continues making her own choices. His story opens a powerful conversation about the limits of influence, the cost of functioning, and the freedom that comes when you finally understand what belongs to you and what does not. This episode is designed to give you the awareness to recognize where you may be doing too much, the motivation to stop confusing love with rescue, and the courage to take one clear action that protects your energy while allowing other people to grow. So by the end of this conversation, I want you to see the responsibility differently. I really want you to understand that leadership does not require you to carry everybody. That support could create growth, and that healthy boundaries can move you from exhaustion into clarity. So sparklers, I hope you're ready. Let's get into it. Sebastian is one of those characters people remember because he's always trying to keep the situation from becoming a complete mess. He sees what Ariel does not see, understands the risks she is willing to take, and knows that her choices could affect more than just one person. He also understands King Triton's expectations, which places him in an uncomfortable position of trying to protect Ariel while remaining accountable to someone else. Actually, that is a lot of pressure because Sebastian becomes a person standing between the authority and the independence. He's trying to manage the fear of what may happen, the frustration of not being heard, and the responsibility he feels to prevent the situation from getting worse. Now, Sebastian is not alone. Many people live in that position every day. They become the family member who knows too much about everybody's business. They become the leader who notices the problem before the rest of the team. And what about the friend who can predict how a situation will end before the person involved is ready to listen? They carry concern because they care, but the concern slowly becomes responsibility for choices that they did not make. And that is where the exhaustion begins. There's a difference between responsibility and feeling responsible for everything. Being responsible means you handle what belongs to you with integrity, consistency, and maturity. Feeling responsible for everything means you begin carrying emotions, decisions, and consequences that belong to other people. And the first creates leadership. The second creates burnout. Now, Sebastian's concern is understandable because he's not imagining the risks. Ariel is making choices that could have serious consequences. And he's not wrong to care. He's not wrong to speak and not even wrong to warn her. The challenge begins when he starts believing that because he can see the danger, he must control the outcome. Now, that belief is common among capable people. But when you are experienced, observant, and responsible, it can feel almost painful to watch someone ignore good advice. You want to step in because you can make the mistake. You can see the mistake forming. You know how much trouble the decision may cause. You have already imagined the phone call, the argument, the financial costs, the delay, or the emotional damage. You feel the consequence before it even happens. And if you are a parent, you definitely understand that. And as parents, we use our past experience to help our children because we don't want them to go into the lion's den. But sometimes what happened with our situations may be different with theirs. So I definitely understand Sebastian because he is taking on that role of protecting her before it even goes up to the king's level. So Sebastian is really in this weird position as a parent, but then really not a parent. Now, that definitely can create anxiety. And anxiety often tells you that doing more will create control. But really and truly, it really does. You can explain the danger and still be ignored. You can share your experience and still watch somebody choose differently. You can care so deeply and still be unable to prevent another adult from learning through consequences. And that is one of the hardest truths. Influence is real, but influence is not control. A leader can communicate clearly, teach, guide, warn, and even create accountability. A leader cannot force another person to internalize wisdom before that person is ready. Sometimes people hear the lesson through conversation. Sometimes they hear it through consequences. As I talk about, sometimes people hear the lessons through conversation. I remember when I was leading a network marketing team, one of the things that I learned from that company, which is absolutely valuable leadership lessons, is continue moving your team from different events and having them listen to different speakers, because you may be telling your team the same thing over and over and over again, but they would hear it from somebody different that it clicks and they identify with. And I remember the first time that happened to me, where one of my team members repeated what a leader had said. And I'm rolling my eyes at the back of my head and I'm like, how many times have I said that on a team call? But I had to hold back because I had to realize that I may have been saying the same thing, but there was something that was not connecting with what I was saying to them and the way they saw themselves. But this one person was able to make it click. So at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter how the person gets it, as long as they get it, right? And so that's why sometimes people hear the lessons through conversation. Now, that can be difficult to accept when you're the person who sees the trouble coming. You may feel that allowing someone to face the outcome of a decision is cold or uncaring. But in reality, stepping back can be one of the most respectful things you do because it returns responsibility to the person who owns it. And as a leader, I had to do that because I kept on saying certain things, but it didn't land. For different team members, they had to go through it themselves. But in Sebastian's case, Sebastian keeps trying to save Ariel from the choices she's determined to make. His concern is definitely sincere, but sincerity does not create authority over her life. And that is where many people become frustrated. They believe that good advice should produce obedience. It does not. And going back to being a parent, if you are a parent, you will experience this. And some parents can get to the point that they want to give up. But good advice gives the other person a clearer decision, but it does not remove their freedom to make a poor one. Your responsibility is to communicate honestly. Now, their responsibility is to decide what they will do with what they heard. That distinction can change your life. It allows you to care without being consumed by the outcome. It allows you to tell the truth without turning every conversation into a campaign. It allows you to remain available without becoming responsible for someone else's maturity. Now, think about the people in your life who repeatedly ask for advice and then do the opposite. You may have spent hours explaining, encouraging, helping. Then the same problem returns. So at some point, the issue is no longer a lack of information. The person already knows what you think. The real issue is whether they are willing to take responsibility. Now, continue to provide more advice can become a way of avoiding the truth that they may not be ready to change. And this is where caring people often do too much. They repeat themselves because repeating feels like action. They continue explaining because silence feels irresponsible. And they keep stepping in because watching someone struggle makes them uncomfortable. But guess what? This discomfort may belong to you, but the lesson may belong to them. You've chosen to be uncomfortable. That has nothing to do with them. And that part is important because every time you rescue someone from a consequence, you may be interrupting the very experience that could create their growth. This doesn't mean you watch people suffer when they're in genuine danger. It means you learn to distinguish between an emergency and a predictable result of someone refusing responsibility. Those are not the same thing. An emergency may require intervention. A repeated pattern may require boundary. Sebastian's situation becomes exhausting because he's trying to be the warning system, the protector, the problem solver, the emotional manager at the time. Many dependable people live exactly like that. They become so used to anticipating problems that rest feels irresponsible. Even when nothing is happening, their mind is preparing for what may go wrong. They tell themselves that being alert is part of being loving. Over time, they lose the ability to separate the care from the control. And that can create some sort of resentment because you begin helping people you are quietly angry with because they keep needing help. You continue stepping in while wishing they would finally step up. You become irritated by a pattern that your own behavior keeps supporting. And that truth may sting, but it can also set you free because sometimes we resent people for dependent on a system that we helped build. If you always remind someone, they may stop remembering. If you always repair the mistake, they may stop preparing. If you always step in, they may stop building confidence in their own ability to handle the situation. Overfunctioning can teach another person to underfunction. The dependable person does more and more. Everybody else learns to do less. Now, at first, this can feel like love. It can feel like leadership. It can even feel like strength, but eventually it becomes a trap. The more capable you become, the more everyone expects you to carry. The more you carry, the less room others have to grow. Then you become exhausted and frustrated because nobody seems able to function without you. And that is not sustainable. Strong leaders build capacity in other people. A healthy leader does not prove value by remaining indispensable. A healthy leader creates the conditions for other people to become capable, responsible, and confident. That requires patience because development is really as fast as rescue. When you take over, the tasks may get completed quickly, but when you allow someone to learn, the process may be slower and imperfect. The slower process can feel inefficient, but it creates something rescue cannot create. It creates ownership in that person. That is the point. Support should help someone become stronger. Rescue may help them avoid discomfort. And those are two different outcomes. Sebastian cares about Ariel, but his constant attempt to prevent every consequence places her under pressure that was never meant to be permanent. The same thing happens in our families, in friendships. In the workplace, in churches, and in our communities, one person becomes the default fixer because they're content. Everybody starts calling that person because they know they will answer the call. Over time, the person's usefulness becomes the relationship. They're valued for what they can solve. That can create a deeper emotional issue because some people learn early that being needed is the safest way to feel loved. They become useful before they become known. They learn that people praise them when they perform, when they help, provide, organize, or carry the load. And that creates an identity built around usefulness. Then rest feels dangerous because rest removes the performance. Setting a boundary feels risky because the person may stop needing you. Letting someone solve their own problem can feel like losing your place in the relationship. And that is why overfunctioning is not always a time management issue. Sometimes it's an identity issue. You may not simply be trying to help. You may be trying to protect your value. Ask yourself this question honestly. Who are you when nobody needs you to fix anything? I know that question can be uncomfortable for you who have spent years being the strong one and answering all the questions and fixing all the things. If your identity is built entirely around solving problems, then peace can feel pretty empty. You can unconsciously create or enter situations where your usefulness becomes necessary because being needed becomes so familiar. And that is not a choice. That's not a character flaw. It's a pattern that deserves your awareness. The awareness gives you options. Now, you can begin learning that your value also exists in your presence, wisdom, creativity, and your humanity. You don't have to earn belonging by becoming everyone's rescue plan. That realization is what I call part of the unbox your brilliance, because brilliance is not measured by how much weight you can carry before you collapse. Brilliance isn't discernment. It includes knowing when to step in, when to speak, and when to let someone else take responsibility. Because your ability to solve problems, that's a gift, but every gift requires stewardship. A gift used without limits can become a burden. And this is especially important as we close out Caribbean American Heritage Month, because Caribbean culture carries strong values around family, community, loyalty, respect, and showing up for one another. And those values create strength. They help families survive hard season. They create networks of support, teach people that nobody should face struggle alone. The difficulty begins when support becomes uneven. One person becomes responsible for everyone's needs, and that role starts to feel permanent. They're expected to organize the response, find the answer, make the phone calls, and somehow keep everyone calm. People may even say, you are better at this, as if competence means unlimited capacity. Eventually, the helper becomes tired, and the family may not understand because they have become used to the person always finding a way. Community should not require one person to disappear. Family loyalty should not mean one person carries the emotional and practical load for everyone. Healthy community shares responsibilities. Now, that doesn't mean everybody contributes in the same way. It means people are expected to own what they're capable of carrying. Because Sebastian's story gives us a way to laugh at the dynamic while still confronting it. He's worried because he knows what could happen. He keeps trying to prevent the crisis. Meanwhile, Ariel remains focused on what she wants. That tension shows the limit of advice. You can't want maturity for someone more than they want it for themselves. You can't force responsibility into another adult through worry. And you can't carry enough anxiety to make someone else change. That one may need to sit for a minute, because worry can feel productive because it keeps your mind active. It creates the feeling that you're doing something, but worry does not create control. It simply allows someone else's choices to occupy your body. Your shoulders tighten, your sleep pattern changes, your mind runs through every possible outcome. Meanwhile, the person making the decisions may be resting perfectly well. Now, what kind of arrangement is that? Leadership requires boundaries, and emotional boundaries allows you to care about someone without carrying their entire emotional experience inside your own body. It allows you to say, I'm concerned, and I have communicated that concern, but I will not continue rehearsing this problem all day. That is not selfish, and that is being responsible. Boundaries are often misunderstood because people imagine them as walls of punishment. A healthy boundary is clarity about responsibility. It says, I know what belongs to me, and I know what belongs to you. That clarity protects responsibility because resentment grows when expectations remain hidden. If you keep saying yes while wishing you could say no, the relationship begins collecting resentment. The other person may not even realize what the help is costing you because you continue to give it without honest communication. Boundaries bring the hidden costs into the light. They allow you to remain generous without being depleted. They can also give the other person the option to grow. Because when you stop rescuing, the person may struggle at first. That struggle does not automatically mean you made the wrong decision. Growth often feels uncomfortable. Someone who has been used to your reminders may miss a deadline. Someone who expects you to solve the problem may become frustrated, or someone who benefited from your lack of limits may call your new boundary selfish. Their reaction does not determine whether boundary is healthy. People sometimes experience your clarity as rejection because unlimited access had become so normal. Your role is not to convince them to enjoy the change. Your role is to communicate with respect and remain consistent. Consistency matters because a boundary that changes every time someone becomes upset is not a boundary. It's a suggestion. Sebastian's problem is not that he cares too much. His problem is that he carries responsibility beyond his authority. And that's what happens to leaders every day. They feel responsible for the results that depend on choices they can't make for other people. A coach can provide a strong plan, but the client must take action. A supervisor can establish expectations, but guess what? The employee must complete the work. As a parent, you can offer wisdom, but an adult child must make that decision. My goodness, a motivational speaker can deliver this amazing message, but the listener must decide whether awareness becomes action, because leadership creates opportunity. It does not guarantee participation. That is why one of the most important questions leaders can ask is, what belongs to me in this situation? That question brings on so much clarity. Maybe your responsibility is to tell the truth, or to provide guidance, or to establish consequence, or reinforce or enforce a standard, or to maybe set back. Stepping back can be an act of leadership when staying involved keeps another person from taking ownership. That is what matters. That is what makes boundaries so powerful. A boundary does not remove love. It changes the form love takes. Instead of rescuing, love may become honesty. Instead of taking over, love may become patience. And instead of preventing every consequence, love may become allowing someone to learn. That may feel harsh in the beginning, but when you're used to helping, but constant rescue can delay the maturity. There comes a point when doing less is actually the more responsible choice. And this is where the brag comes in and connects to Sebastian's lesson. Brag means believing that you are responsible for amplifying God's greatness in you. Responsibility is central in that definition, but responsibility has to be understood with wisdom. You are responsible for your integrity, your voice, choices, gifts, and your leadership. You're responsible for you're not responsible for controlling every adult around you. and not responsible for making sure everybody follows your advice. You're not responsible for preventing every consequence that another person creates. And what about carrying every emotional reaction that follows a boundary? When you understand that, you stop confusing responsibility with self-abandonment. You begin using your gifts with intention. Now, you still help, but you ask whether the help is producing growth. Of course, you're always going to care, but you stop letting care become control. You're still going to show up, but you stop becoming the entire support system. That is healthy leadership. This awareness also changes the way you think about strength. Strength is not always proven by carrying more. Sometimes strength is proven by putting something down. Or what about admitting that a responsibility was never yours? Or letting another capable adult face the outcome of their decision. That can be difficult for some women who have been praised for always being available. Availability becomes part of the brand some people place on you. They know you will answer. They know you'll make it happen. And they know you'll find a solution. That can feel flattering until it becomes expected, because that's not sustainable. Then your strength becomes a public utility. Everybody uses it, but very few people ask how it's being replenished. You have to ask, who is caring for the person who's always caring for everyone else? I'm going to repeat that. Who is caring for the person who's always caring for someone else? Who's supporting the person everyone calls? What about who gives a strong person permission to just be human? Sometimes that permission has to come from you. You have to decide that your value is not connected to being constantly available. You have to decide that a delayed response is not disloyalty. You have to decide that rest does not make you irresponsible. You also have to decide that other people are allowed to develop skills that you have been using on their behalf. That decision can change an entire family or a team dynamic. When one person stops over-functioning, the system has to adjust. Some people will step up. Some will complain. Some may reveal that they never intended to carry their share. But that's also important and useful information, because a boundary gives you clarity about who is willing to participate in a healthy relationship and who was mainly benefiting from your labor. Now, that doesn't mean that you become bitter. It means that you become informed. Sebastian's loyalty is admirable, and his story reminds us that loyalty needs direction. Loyalty to another person should not require disloyalty to yourself. You can remain committed to people while refusing to maintain their life, to manage their life. You can be loving without becoming responsible for every outcome. What about tell the truth once without repeating it 20 times in different formats, in different fonts? And this last one may save someone's blood pressure. You don't need a new explanation every time someone rejects the old one. Sometimes the advice is that they understand and still made a different choice. Accepting that reality may bring disappointment, but it also brings freedom. It allows you to release the imaginary job of making everyone else do the right thing, or even do the thing that you think is the right thing, because that job has no vacation days, no PTO, and it has terrible benefits. I hope that you can resign that. That resignation does not remove you from being a leader. It improves your leadership because your energy becomes available for the responsibility that actually belongs to you. You can focus on your own growth. What about your own health? Your own goals and the people that you are willing to, and the people who are willing to participate in change. That is how boundaries protect purpose. When too much of your energy is spent managing other people, your own assignment suffers. You delay your work because you are solving their problem. You ignore your needs because somebody else has created another crisis. You lose focus because your mind is occupied by situations you cannot control. Then you wonder why you're tired and behind. The problem may not be discipline. The problem may be misplaced responsibility. You may be giving your best energy to work that was never assigned to you. That is why today's message matters so strongly. Stop carrying what is not yours. That does not mean that you become careless. It means you become clear. Clarity allows you to respond to genuine need without creating permanent dependence. Clarity allows you to be compassionate without being controlled by guilt. And clarity allows you to use your wisdom without trying to become someone else's consequence. It allows you to remain present without becoming consumed. And before we close out today, I want to give you one thing for the week. Choose one responsibility you've been carrying that belongs to another capable adult and return it. Don't create a list of 10 things. Don't try to change every relationship at once. Just do one. Maybe you've been reminding someone about something they're fully capable of remembering, or you've been completing part of another person's work, or you become the messenger in a conflict that does not involve you. Choose one responsibility and step back. When the urge to take over appears, ask yourself one question. Will my involvement help this person grow, or would it keep them dependent on me? Use that question for the entire week. That is your action. Pay attention to what comes up inside when you do less. You may feel guilty. You may feel anxious. You may be even tempted to step in before the other person has a chance to respond, but notice the feeling without obeying it immediately. That moment is part of your growth. You're learning that discomfort does not always mean danger. Sometimes discomfort means a pattern is changing. The other person may also feel uncomfortable because they're being asked to carry something you usually handle. Allow that process. You're not withdrawing love. You're making room for responsibility. Sebastian reminds us that caring deeply does not make us responsible for every outcome. We can advise people, tell the truth, and offer support while allowing them to own their choices. The strongest leaders don't carry everything. They help people become stronger. Your care should not require you to disappear. So as we close out on Caribbean American History Month, let this episode be a reminder that community and boundaries can exist together. We can honor family, loyalty, and cultural responsibility while also creating healthier patterns that allow everyone to contribute. We can care deeply and still stop caring what is not ours. We can lead responsibly and still release that outcome. You can support people and still expect them to grow. So thank you for spending this time with me, Leslie George, on Mosaic Sparks. If this episode spoke to you, share it with a dependable person who's always caring more than they share. Share it with a leader who needs permission to guide without controlling. And share it with a woman who is ready to stop measuring her value by how many people that she needs to fix. So remember, you can care deeply, lead responsibility, and still stop carrying what is not yours. So see you on the next episode of Mosaic Sparks. Until next time, bye for now.
Mm-hmm.